Welcome to Neuropod, where I cover all topics related to Elon Musk's brain implant company, Neuralink. In this video, I'm going to share the highlights from patients describing what Neuralink actually feels like to them.
It was like using the force on a cursor, and I could get it to move wherever I wanted, just stare somewhere in the screen, and it would move where I wanted it to. Which was such a wild experience.
This guy wants to know if you feel like a wizard.
Yeah, right. It's crazy. It really is. It's so cool. I'm so freaking lucky to be a part of this and stuff. I mean, every day it seems like we're learning new stuff, and I just can't even describe how cool it is to be able to do this.
Imagine you can't move a single part of your body below your shoulders. Now, even worse, imagine being in that situation before computers were invented. You wouldn't be able to scroll on social media, play video games, or even do productive work. You'd be trapped. You'd be dependent on others to help you eat, bathe, and even use the bathroom. This is why Neuralink is so important. They're already giving freedom to people who are paralyzed. There are more than 24 human trial patients with this linked device. Neuralink grabs their raw brain signals and sends them via Bluetooth directly to their computers. And more recently, they've gone even further by connecting their brain implant to the patient wheelchairs and assistive robotic arms. In other words, this device not only provides digital freedom, but also physical freedom. These patients no longer feel trapped, and it's thanks to the hard engineering work of the Neuralink team. The patients simply think about where they want the cursor to go, and it goes there. They don't move, they don't need to look in any specific place, they don't even need to say anything. The implant simply has these super tiny electrical sensors that read the electrical activity of the brain's neurons. It then uses AI to decode those brain signals to determine what the patient wants to do. And since these signals move at the speed of electricity, it feels like magic to these patients. Let's talk about the most common questions I hear. What does this feel like? Does it hurt? Does it get hot? In a literal sense, the answer I've heard from many patients is what Nolan said here. I have no sensation of it, no way of telling it's there unless someone goes and physically pushes on it. But that doesn't mean they don't feel the impact of the device every day. While the patients may not physically feel it working, it is still causing patients like Jake to share thoughts like this. Driving the chair with my mind was such an exhilarating feeling, the most hope I have felt since my ALS diagnosis. I am honored to be developing this technology that will change the world and improve the lives of millions of people. This aligns well with what another patient, CJ, shared with his interview with Tesla owner Silicon Valley.
When I was interviewing for Neuralink, the engineer said, being a participant in this phase 1 trial isn't as much for you as it is for Neuralink and the people that'll come after you.
Though there is clearly some benefit these patients hope to receive, there is still no guarantee everything will go smoothly. Neuralink is still in the FDA clinical trial testing phase, and the devices are not fully approved for commercial public use. That should come soon, but in order to get to this point, they had to go through years of detailed testing of every kind in their cutting-edge labs and testing with rats, pigs, sheep, and monkeys. Which makes me think about something. Prior state-of-the-art devices like the Utah array required a sharp grid of metal needles to get air hammered into the brain tissue. This would cause bleeding, scarring, and some other not-so-ideal consequences. Plus, the final result wasn't that much brain data. In other words, more risk, less reward. With Neuralink, the patients are super fortunate to have a much safer device that is implanted using a custom robot. Now, their risk and reward both move in the opposite direction. The robot grabs these tiny little threads with sensors on them and carefully sticks them in the brain while perfectly avoiding all the blood vessels. So going back to the questions about the patients being able to feel anything, well, it's great. Actually, it's fantastic that the patients don't notice anything, they don't feel anything, and aren't bothered by it. This is very different from prior devices that were wired and had these boxes sticking out of the head. Now, someone who has ALS, a spinal cord injury, is locked in, or paralyzed for some other reason, can apply to get a Neuralink and use it outside of the hospital. Specifically, think about the levels of freedom this enables. First, if you're paralyzed and can't walk, move, or use the computer, then it's a game changer to just be able to play video games or browse the internet on your own. Well, prior brain interface devices enabled that a little bit. But the next level is being able to do those things in the comfort of your own home. That is what Neuralink enabled. Now, patients can use the assistive robotic arm to feed themselves, which is a whole new level of freedom. It's moved the freedom beyond the digital world and into our physical world. And then there's the next level even beyond that, which is the rejuvenated sense of purpose and reason to wake up every day. Over time, the patients become one with their brain chip. They get a sense of belonging because they get to work closely with the Neuralink team to improve the devices for future patients. The fulfillment of being able to contribute after many years of asking for help is a level of satisfaction that could even be better than walking again. So even if they can't physically feel the device, what do they feel when they use it? Nolan says, it's weird to be able to move without moving. There are actually two ways patients are able to move their computer cursor. First, they move the cursor by simply trying to physically do what a healthy, fully abled body person could do. They try to physically put their hand out, grab the mouse, and move it up, down, right, and left. Oddly enough, the brain is still sending the same brain signals to their spinal cord. It's just that the signals never reach where they need to go because of the spinal cord injury. So the way this implant works is that it just intercepts the brain signals and sends them straight to your computer. And then there's the next stage. After doing this for a while, something clicks and they stop attempting the movement and just imagine it. You think, cursor, go right, and it goes right. The day that happened, Nolan spent the day giggling, calling it the coolest thing he had ever seen. He went from trying to physically move his cursor to having the mouse cursor move before he could even think about it. Each patient's brain is unique. You might assume everyone controls the cursor by thinking about their hand, but this is not the case. Brad Smith, the first nonverbal person with ALS to get one, found that his best control came from imagining moving something other than his hand. I found that imagining moving my tongue allowed me to control the cursor more precisely, and clenching my jaw helped me click virtually with the mouse. Someone else, Alex, the second patient, controls a robotic arm by picturing his forearm moving through 3D space and letting the implant lock onto the direction. Every brain uses a slightly different control method, and the Neuralink device is flexible enough to adapt. Consider how mind-blowing that is. Neuralink builds these devices that are the same for everyone. Well, there are different versions that constantly get updated, but the physical components are pretty much the same for each patient. But the AI software is highly adaptable. It is customized for every user and recalibrated by every user. This customization, largely enabled by AI advancements, is well suited to the brain because, as you might imagine, there is more variation in our individual brains than in our fingerprints. We are each one of one. This makes it extra special for patients who see their own neurons fire on a screen for the first time. For someone who has not moved in years, watching the proof that the brain is still fully working to send signals to your muscles is sensational.
When I was able to see my neurons firing for the first time, it really made me kind of emotional, thinking that, when I move my index finger, there are still like neuron spikes, neurons firing in my brain.
He said he watched the screen light up, said out loud, "That's my index finger," and the whole room lit up with commotion. Years after being told his body was done, here was live evidence he's still got it. So for now, the implant did not give him a new ability so much as it reconnected him to an old one. But this experience has not purely been rainbows and butterflies. About a month after Nolan's surgery, his implant wasn't working as well as before. Around 85% of the metal threads inserted into his brain tissue were starting to pull back and slip out from getting the brain data. As a result, his ability to control the computer started to disappear. He was the first person in the world to experience this incredible new technology. He experienced the remarkable freedom it enabled, and then experienced it starting to slip away. Nolan said that was really hard to come to terms with, that it felt like it was all going to come crashing down. Put yourself in his shoes and think about that. You are given something that gives you back a piece of your independence and freedom, and then it starts to fail, and nobody is sure if it can be saved. After working day and night with the team, they were able to find a solution. Using software, they didn't even need to perform another surgery. Neuralink recovered the performance by reprogramming how the software reads the threads that were still attached. Viewing this optimistically, you could say this problem was a blessing in disguise. By being forced to read from a smaller sample of brain data, Neuralink was pushed to see what they could do. In other words, it made their ability to read from the brain more efficient. But I don't want to make this sound effortless. There is real work behind the engineering magic. In the early days, patients do daily sessions, about an hour at a time, running through what they call body mapping. They watch an animation of a hand, making different movements that they mirror in their mind, teaching the software to read them. It is less of a grind than a kind of training, but it is training, and it takes time before it feels natural. A recent UK patient, an Army veteran named John Noble, described that experience by saying, 100 days since I received my Neuralink N1 implant. At first, it felt like trying to remember a dream, but by week 3, it was second nature. Scrolling, clicking, typing, all mind-controlled. By around day 80, John was playing World of Warcraft, raiding, hands-free. Now, the most common fear I hear is no one wants the implant to read their thoughts, and the best person to respond to that is an actual patient. You know the don't die guy? Well, in 2021, I drove up to LA to interview Brian Johnson. He was building a brain interface startup. While I was there, I asked him about Project Blueprint. Maybe it was called something else different at the time, but before, during, and after the interview, I was and still remain a big fan of his, and am thankful that he, his girlfriend Kate, and his son Talmadge are willing to essentially be human guinea pigs. They're running all of these tests to help us all optimize our health. And what's even better is they're not only sharing that data publicly, but they're also giving us access to the actual products. Instead of the best products costing hundreds of thousands of dollars and only being available to a few famous people, they've set up the supply chains and built products that we can actually just click a button to buy. I've been taking his omega-3, collagen, and creatine for several months and am confident that Project Blueprint has the best quality supplements we can take. I've gotten a special referral code, so this is your chance to try it out before the deal ends. Right now, I can save you $50 on your first order. I've put the link in my bio. 50. Brad Smith shared, Neuralink does not read my deepest thoughts or words I think about. It just reads how I want to move and moves the cursor where I want. And even for the newer voice trial implant, which is placed over the part of the brain that is used for talking, the patient has to intend to speak. Kenneth in the speech trial described it like this. The BCI is located over the speech area of my brain. I have to intend to speak to get any meaningful output and signal the app to listen. So for now, the fears are misplaced. Elon and the team are not eavesdropping on your plans to prank your brother. Your private thoughts stay private, because your private thoughts aren't where the implant is placed. In the future, Neuralink will implant in other brain areas, like the visual cortex to help the blind see, and in the auditory cortex to help deaf people hear. They'll help patients with Parkinson's disease reduce their tremors, and so much more. But until the devices are much more advanced, the concerns about reading your mind are simply not possible. Once the calibration is done and the initial novelty wears off, the patients become readjusted to their new norm. Nolan says,
I'm interacting with people through a computer with the Neuralink from my bed as a quadriplegic, like any person could from, wherever they are in their lives. And I think that's amazing. Sometimes I forget, I forget that, I'm even paralyzed and that I'm, restricted, like you said, in the way that I am, because it's just so seamless.
Audrey Cruz, the first woman to get a Neuralink, used it to write her own name for the first time in about 20 years. Her takeaway was that the independence is amazing. Not having to ask her caretaker for everything was a game changer for her daily life. So a Neuralink physically feels like nothing at all, which Neuralink did on purpose. Simultaneously, it feels like moving without moving, like getting freedom and independence back, like having new hope for a better life. And if you want to hear from one of these patients, check out one of my interview episodes with the patients here.